Now by Will Weissert of the Associated Press, covering all of this for the AP. Will, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And we know that President Trump has said this meeting is on. No real word from the Kremlin. What's the likelihood that this actually happens?
Well, I think it's pretty strong. The president was very clear and didn't leave a lot of sort of wiggle room, and said that they're meeting in Alaska, which is on U.S. territory, which is sort of interesting. The Kremlin hasn't sort of confirmed the date and exactly the details, but it's hard to believe that we'd get sort of this far down the road and then not have any meeting at all. Now, whether the meeting will lead to a significant breakthrough, it still remains to be seen. There's still, a lot of ground to cover and a lot of sort of behind the scenes work that needs to be done before the actual meeting can start. But I would be surprised at this point if we don't at least see them meet in Alaska on Friday, like the president said.
You mentioned the location being especially peculiar because I think we talked about a potential meeting between Trump and Putin at the Vatican for the death of the Pope, and that didn't come to fruition. What's particular about Alaska? Is there anything in your eyes that's special about that?
Well, I think it's significant that Trump, is proposing that this happen on U.S. soil. Putin came out early last week and said that he'd like to meet in the United Arab Emirates, and sort of he wanted to set the tone on where the meeting might take place. And now you have Trump coming out and saying, no, it's going to be in Alaska. It's obviously it's not in Washington, but it's still on U.S. soil. It requires both leaders to travel, but it's still the fact that Trump is imposing this happening on U.S. soil, I think, is a play to sort of show that he's the one who's setting the term for the meeting. And I think that's why we haven't heard from the Kremlin come back 100% and say they're ready to do this. I think we will, we will get there and the meeting will happen. But I do think that the significance of that is basically just Trump trying to sort of set the tone and say, we're going to do this on U.S. soil, and that's going to show how important how seriously we're taking these issues and how important this is for us.
Yeah, we know obviously the proximity from Alaska to Russia there. This is a bilateral at this point. But
we turn now to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who joins us from The Hague in the Netherlands. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Margaret, good to be back on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Mr. Secretary General, big picture here. Is Russia's Vladimir Putin still a direct threat to the Western alliance, or is he showing some sign of dropping his aggression?
He is still the main threat to the Western alliance. There's no doubt. And I think it is very good that President Trump will test him, and we'll see how far he can get on Friday, starting this process. He basically broke the deadlock, President Trump, in February, starting the dialogue with Putin. I think that was crucial. We had a great NATO summit under his leadership, committing to 5% defense spending, so that is a clear signal to our main threat, which is Russia, that we are serious. And then he opened the floodgates 3 weeks ago of American lethal weapons to be delivered into Ukraine, coordinated by NATO. And of course, the secondary sanctions. He started them with putting them on India, which is one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil and gas. What will happen on Friday is testing Putin by President Trump. And I commend him for the fact that he organized this meeting. I think it is important. And obviously, when it comes to peace talks, the ceasefire, and what happens after that on territories, on security guarantees for Ukraine, Ukraine will have to be and will be involved. But on Friday, it is important to see how serious Putin is. And the only one who can do that is President Trump. So it's really crucial that that meeting takes place. It will not be the final say on this. There will not be the final deal on this. Of course, Ukraine will have to be involved in Europe. But it is important to start the next phase of this process, putting pressure on the Russians, exactly as President Trump has been doing over the last 6 months.
Far the worst that's happened since World War II. So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war, you got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. We had a discussion about it one time, and we never had that discussion again. Would have never happened. And when the election was rigged, and then Biden took office, which was barely took office, the auto pen took office, bad things started happening, bad things, stupid things were said, and it ended up in a war. And